Guys. So today we're going to be looking at our development opportunity, State Highway 28. And you can find all of these development opportunities. I'll just navigate as you would to our site. If you're on our site, you can come to this drop down menu here, go to developments. This one is actually one of the ones listed right off here. But if you go to see all, you can scroll through and basically look through kind of all the options we have. This one is right down here, Latino Road, State Highway 28 in the 600, 900K range. So this is a really beautiful lot that is in Delaware County, just right outside of the town of Andes, New York. And it's a really sort of interesting parcel for us because it kind of has these stunning views, but I think as in many of our raw lots are really kind of pretty forested lots, and the game we play becomes sort of being really strategic in how we place our standards and kind of develop a concept. This is actually starting as a really cleared field. So we're thinking of this project more of a fill in project. So, kind of, how do you take this lot that is really, kind of got these endless views of these rolling mountains and kind of a lot of potential and start to kind of basically repopulate it with nature and almost create this connection between like the domesticated nature of the garden, of the farm, of the orchard, and this kind of more bucolic, picturesque, rolling landscape. So if you look at sort of our HUTS world map here and our HUTSiverse, our development opportunity is actually right up here. It hasn't been put in, but it's right outside the town of Andes near the Pectin Reservoir. And it's really right in kind of our sort of greater sphere of influence here. But of course, we have projects really starting to pop up all over the East Coast and really sort of all over the country. So that's where we are coming right now. But going back down to State Highway, it's a pretty big lot. It's 19 acres, and we're imagining this kind of all-in development cost at around $900,000. So starting this out, we're imagining this in two pieces. This is a HUTS medium bar and a HUTS ADU as sort of the two structures that we're playing with. And as we kind of work through all of these development opportunities, we really like to kind of imagine who this would be for, who kind of what would be the purpose of this development, so we can really kind of think about the target audience. And in this case, it would be sort of a younger family, somebody living in New York who's really kind of seeking a place, the fields for the kids to play on, sort of like what is kind of the real counterpoint to, living in a very gridded, structured, kind of beautiful Brooklyn. But this is a development opportunity located again in sort of the center of Delaware County and Andes. Here's
Just a,
this.
just a note here for anyone who's not familiar with Andes or the Delaware County area, where we're really looking at is in north of the Western Catskills. And so you're kind of in the northern foothills of the Catskills. And in a lot of these cases, you have lots that are looking south, both getting great southern light, but also seeing the ridge line of the Western Catskills from the north side. And the landscape here tends to be quite farmy, rolling hills, bucolic with a kind of mountain ridge in the distance. And in the case of Andes, a fantastic town with its kind of burgeoning culinary scene, interesting kind of new stores and retail popping up. It's next to the town of Bovino, which has a similar sort of trajectory. And you're also not far from the Pacton Reservoir, which as one of the primary drinking resources of New York City is enormous, but it's also usable. And so a great kind of fishing location, great for kayaking, great for canoeing, all kinds of motorized uses for the reservoir.
Thanks, Wayne. And I mean, I think this area really kind of is is an agricultural area as well. Like there's really a lot of kind of farm to table thing of sort of the farms being in the town of, with the table being in Andes, but the farms kind of really being the theme we're trying to kind of play with this opportunity as well, and kind of like thinking about this is somebody who's really kind of into the idea of getting their hands dirty, and sort of having a lot that is something that kind of grows and nurtures and nurtured over the sort of years as ideally the the family does as well. So for this property, when you can start to see these images here, we're imagining putting a Huts medium bar as the main house, which is sort of a very efficient standard, but a has a 3 bedroom standard, and then a Huts little cottage, which is the smallest of our ADUs, and a really efficient piece. So this lot is listed at 100 and $200,000, $199,000 from the realtor Stephen Jewett, and you can also check this parcel out on our land listing service. There's a bunch of other land parcels that we've vetted and selected that we really think are special. So that's another piece that you can peruse and sign up for if that's something you're interested in. But here we have the lot. You can see it's this again quite a large 20-acre lot. Sort of a cleared, was probably farmland. You can see sort of the forest area. There's a couple places where the forest is creeping back on the lot, but it's really a cleared lot with basically rising up. So there's about 200 feet in elevation gain over the entire thing. So you're really up from this pretty major state highway 28. So kind of this is significant traffic coming through here, which is something we're really trying to think about in both pushing the buildings back in the site and thinking about ways to screen from that. So here again is the raw lot. There's some neighbors to the south, but again, you've really got sort of this ideal sunlight combination of sloping up, but really kind of perfectly cleared for the southern exposure and the sun path kind of coming across this way.
Like what we see with a lot of these sort of reclaimed former agricultural lots is that they work really well as future kind of permaculture destinations where you kind of rethink the place as a sort of meadowscape. And I think that this one would work really well for that. And that the shape and topography of the lot and the orientation of it makes it feel kind of like a catcher's mitt for sunlight, which this is. It's a big long wedge that at all times of the day, at every time of the year, it's collecting sunlight. And so if your goal is to be sort of hidden in the thick forest and living out sort of a Hansel and Gretel dream, this isn't the place. If your goal is that you want to do some micro farming or take advantage of a growing season that is probably longer on this lot than it is in almost anywhere else in the region, then this is the spot for you. And I think that that's probably a really great precondition thinking about this parcel is like, hey, if I wanted to lay out some raised beds or I wanted to experiment with orcharding or other kind of permacultural approaches, this is a really fantastic blank canvas to make that happen.
Awesome. So to purchase a lot, you'd buy it for $200,000. It'd be some due diligence, just sort of making sure everything is where it needs to be, and kind of looking through the code and figuring out that piece of it. But basically, once we're ready to go, we hop right into site planning and land improvement. And our feeling is this is really such a crucial part of success of any project. I mean, it's the kind of thing where like you kind of want to think both 1, 5, and 10 years down the line, such that if you have a phased plan where you can really begin to see how this is going to unfold over kind of the whole time you're going to use it, you can start to do things like make sure you potentially oversize the septic system such that it can, if you're doing interface development, if you want to do another piece of it later, it can handle that as you come in, or sort of really, thinking through each piece of sort of locating the site, making sure you leave spots such that, it kind of you can sort of separate things later. Also, really paying attention, sort of in well and septic, with the slopes and where things are going. But this lot in particular, sort of, it's we're imagining orcharding as a piece of how you would approach it. So that in and of itself takes time, right? You kind of plant the sapling and let it sit for quite some time as it grows. But with this as well, we're kind of, because we're dealing with this highway coming across at the bottom here, we're potentially thinking about, you know, doing a little bit of cut and fill excavation, which is potentially sort of what will be sort of thinking about a retaining pond and a berm. So if you dig it out, I mean, with a retaining pond, which you'll see in the next site map, you can begin to collect all of the water that's sloping down here and use the gray water as a way to start to water all your orchard, your farms, your gardens, sort of the things you're playing with on this site. And you'll be able to take that existing dirt and use it as a barrier that can then become, a very sort of beautiful natural element that's seeded, that's sort of wildflowered on top of, but really kind of pushing, both sort of screening views and pushing sound up and over, especially this sort of the lower buildings on your structure. The taller ones probably won't be such an issue, but that's the idea with sort of thinking of a berm and kind of a cut and fill landscape move. So in this first phase, you're building this initial driveway, pushing it back as well. So this is really kind of this key moment where you can phase out the rest of your project. So, in prepping, kind of, if we look at the pro forma, we're sort of imagining kind of spending up front here, really kind of, you're building a longer driveway back into the site. You're doing this initial landscaping work. You're sort of putting in a larger septic system. So for this phase, you're putting in, about $270,000. But I think the kind of important thing that we always like to point out about this land improvement phase is it's really kind of on the value curve. It's where things get really steep. It's where you're really forcing equity into the project such that the value of the land actually increases sort of significantly more than just by the numbers of cash you put into it. So, we're imagining at this phase, you're actually starting to create real value here to the sort of degree of maybe $73,000 here. So for the first kind of construction phase of this project, we're imagining putting in an ADU and a greenhouse. And the idea behind sort of, it's kind of a great test bed of like, we're gonna start by giving you a place you can stay very quickly on your land, that you can begin to rent out as well if rental becomes a piece of how you start to think about this. And we're imagining placing this ADU right in the orchard with sort of an equal size greenhouse. Kind of got a where you can begin to start plants as well for your future garden. It's a lot of incubating that happens in this process. So we're imagining the little cottage is the ADU, the greenhouse, and again at this point we would have sort of burned out and dug this retaining pond at the bottom to water all your kind of plantings as they come along. So this is our little cottage ADU we're imagining. It's a 10 by 10 room, but sort of, especially when placed in context with the orchard, it's an incredibly efficient space that really begins to take advantage of all the outdoor room around it. So with a deck, it really becomes this extension of itself, and it feels a lot bigger than it actually is, because you really begin to have the outside become the inside. And if you can look through the little cottage in our website as well, and see kind of the different kitchenette, living areas, wet room, ladder, etc. We're sort of really imagining this to be, this kind of incredible experience of living inside an orchard. So this kind of becomes a very brandable kind of rental experience as well. So it's something that is both kind of a great place to come, stay, think through the rest of your property, kind of have an experience with a contractor to see if you want to test that person out for the third phase of your project, building the whole thing. But it's also just a really exciting place on a pond in an orchard that has the potential to be rented out. So this phase, we are imagining kind of the total. You're spending $110,000 to build the little cottage and the greenhouse, etc. But at this point, we're imagining you've through the process of forcing equity into the project and building, you've basically got a $95,000 in value. And we're imagining this is something you can start to rent out for about $200 a night. I mean, sort of as a branded experience, we're trying to be relatively conservative on our pricing, but also in our occupancy. So imagining if this were to basically be rented out about 2/3 of the month, that would produce a revenue stream of about $4,000 a month or $48,000 per year.
I think an important thing to just think about in properties like this and a lot of larger lots is that they don't happen all at once. And they're in this phasing strategy, it's a hallmark of a lot of our development opportunities that we're going from raw land to an improved land and then making a choice on how do you start staying there? Do you stay there in something small and kind of build the guest house or build the guest quarters first? Or do you go with the kind of main house first? And one of the reasons in this case in particular to go with the accessory dwelling first is you're able to turn on the revenue, like Ali was saying. You get a place to stay much more quickly than you would get on a main house. Cost the construction timeline is maybe a third on this accessory dwelling unit over what it's going to be on the main house. Again, the entire theme of this development idea is sort of growing. It's about growing into the place. It's about sort of growing into the lot with the way that you plant it and the way that the orchard develops is about growing into your experience on utilizing the place. And so starting small and growing into it is a way to also keep your debt service low and grow into what you're comfortable with, to grow into kind of construction projects and how much of that or how little of that do you actually want to take on. There are folks that we have worked with who we've started with the ADU and with the plan that they might do a main house later, but they start using an accessory dwelling. They say, that's it. That was the whole thing. I just wanted to be in a little place near the forest or near the meadow or near my orchard. And maybe in this case, that's there too. And so putting those lines between the phases gives you those options. And at the same time, it's a small outlay of a usable building that, like all of this, each one of these steps should be equity positive. That the $75,000 you spend on building the small ADU should, yield some equity and yield some revenue. And I think we're showing that in each of these stages of the performa.
Absolutely. And I think maybe just to add to that a tiny bit, I also think the other thing that really begins to happen once you have a really clear phased out project that is that has really defined areas for the next thing. Once you start building, once you start kind of growing, you're not the only person that can see what the property could be or the potential of the property. So if, at a certain point, you're like, you know what, turns out I want to get a place where it's warmer all year round, and this is not for me, you can sell it. And you can sell it with sort of a real idea of what it should be, which is going to make it a lot more palatable on the market. And I think it becomes a really important way to understand that you're putting equity into this, but it's really what we're really trying to make sure we get you at HUTS is more out than we put in, right? So it's more, everything we're putting in, we're paying for ourselves and some at every process, at every move we make, which I think is, being right side up on a development. It's just being part of being a responsible developer and a responsible kind of project. So The third phase of this project is the thing you've been waiting for. Your home, your standard, which is a medium bar. So we're imagining this to be kind of really pushed all the way back at the northwest corner of this property because the views up here are just so spectacular. I mean, it's kind of this incredible, as you saw in the beginning, these sort of rolling foothills of the Catskills, and kind of imagining this is a standard sort of almost set in a farm. So kind of having kind of a flower garden be this sort of like first foreground as you're looking out, but kind of then beyond it being sort of a vegetable kind of raised bed feel, and then out to the field and the orchard beyond. So you're really kind of getting this layered landscape experience of this kind of, you know, domesticated, beautiful, out to sort of this kind of, sublime landscapes of the Hudson Valleys. And so that's
And
the
a nice
medium bar here.
circuit here. I think one of the things that we always think about is what is a day in the life of living on this property. And the idea that you kind of start from the top of the lot and sort of work your way around that walking path that you see in the brown line, kind of meandering through the clipping garden, through the vegetable and edibles garden, down through the meadow, through the orchard, over to the ADU, and then back up the driveway. And there's sort of a circuit there that can be either just kind of a coffee walk, or it can also be sort of your workflow. And this is how you're actually going to maintain this place.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you want to begin to use potentially the ADU becomes an office or something, that's your walk down to it's your morning commute. So this standard we are using, and this one is our medium bar, which I think in many ways really is, well, I don't know if it's our most efficient, but it's a very efficient standard because it's really kind of maximizing space. I mean, it's a lofted space, and which kind of allows for the third bedroom, and really this beautiful kind of great room, kitchen, dining space that becomes the heart of the house, and you can check out those more on our standards on the website here. But also, it's kind of following our very efficient sort of 17-foot wide bay, which is kind of a structural dimension that allows us to span really efficiently. There's no corners, which really kind of means it's a fully efficient space. This experience is sort of again capturing these sort of rolling hills again. We've really kind of thought through the kind of layers of screening as well with the road down at the bottom. Kind of looking at the sort of the finalized pro forma here, I was thinking about sort of each of these standards as basically being two different pieces. There's the conditioned shell, which is sort of everything to get you inside. It's kind of the commodities pricing of building. And then fixtures and finishes is really the piece which you can tune up or down. And that really depends on how much you want to spend. If it's, I mean, depending if it's rental, if you want things to be more on the, you don't want to be quite as precious with the fixtures and finishes, or if you're going to stay there all the time and you really want to use that as, you want to go higher end, that is the number you can really tune. This is sort of imagining the entire project being just under $900,000, just at the point of finishing the project without sort of even imagining appreciation of real estate values. We're thinking we've basically created about $200,000 of value by running through this development process, and created a potential annual revenue stream. Imagining that you use the medium bar more and rent it out less, but if you really are focusing on renting it out, you could get to $130,000 a year in revenue from this, pretty easily, which would really help with debt servicing, especially maybe at the beginning of this project. You want to kind of recoup some of your initial capital outlay to build this whole thing. It's certainly something that you could or could not do depending on how you want to use this. yeah, to recoup the completed property is the medium bar up at the top of your site, looking out with these views. The little cottage and orchard is farther down, sort of as this, guest house, rental unit, office, depending on how you imagine yourself using it. That is our development opportunity. I really think it's a special site, and I really like, this sort of reclaiming kind of an old piece of farmland, reclaiming, as Wayne put it, something that is, was this kind of catcher's mitt for sun that was about growth, and kind of reinterpreting the growth to be kind of about the growth of the family and growth of kind of a property as you sort of work your way into it. Yeah,
And diversity of agricultural uses. I mean, I think that this is a place where it's ripe and ready for that. And I think has the has the sun conditions, soil conditions, water conditions, and an existing clearing to kind of get going on it and start thinking about where would you plant first and how do you kind of spread out? Is it sort of orchard first or clipping garden first or vegetable garden first? Or I think that there's opportunities to think about the sequencing throughout, but a special opportunity for somebody who is thinking about a bit more homesteading. And I think that this is a ideal lot to have a less arduous path towards homesteading a parcel. For anyone out there who's interested in this parcel, and either seeing this webinar live or watching it later, and you're interested in exploring this development opportunity with us, just scroll down to the bottom of this page. You'll see a quick form, fill out your information, and we'll be right back in touch with you to discuss what the next opportunities would be to work on this development opportunity. And we hope to work with somebody out there on this who's really in line with our vision for how to utilize this property. Thanks, guys.